Hello, Grimish here. Wanted to try to test making a video about Omnifactory. A couple of buddies and me have been playing it for a few weeks now. Just wanted to go over some of the stuff we've been doing in the early game to maybe help other people out. So kind of starting without too much of a plan, but we're in our base, which, like I said, we're about 2 weeks in. So I'm gonna take things back to the start because we are just about finishing up on the early game and about to get into the mid game. So I've got a few pieces of equipment like those boots that I'm jumping with that let me jump a little bit more than normal, and we just found those through exploring cities. But the first thing you can notice right here is we chose to use the biosphere generation. And so what that does is it creates a world that's largely wasteland and has these giant biospheres. So I will go up into the biosphere to show you where we actually started. I'm going to adjust the music down just a little bit more so this is not quite so overpowering. Okay, so we started out in the middle of this biosphere. One thing to note with the biosphere start is if you do it, it makes the start a little more challenging, mainly because this is very dark, normal tools don't work, and you end up quickly surrounded by stuff, especially if you spawn at night on a multiplayer server. So our first challenge was getting out. And the way we solved that was to punch a hole in the side, and I ended up actually coming out over there, falling onto that tree, falling down there, and then promptly dying because there are also these giant rifts all over the place, like a rift like that. So the first challenge there is if you do decide to do a non-standard biome in Omnifactory, just be aware that there may be some interesting things that you have to deal with right off the bat. So we got out of our biosphere and we immediately found this lost cities generation. Now if I throw up the journey map, you can see these clusters of cities are full of ruined buildings, and they'll have lots of spawners in them and also loot chests. So it's kind of a risk-reward situation there, where you can get a lot of cool gear, like the dark armor boots I have, but you also have to fight a lot of monsters. So we came over and we claimed one of those buildings and cleared it out. And then very quickly built the first very useful tool that you can get in this mod pack, which is a hook. The first one is iron, but we upgraded ours to diamond, and what those let you do is act like Spider-Man, and you can shoot, depending on the tier of hook, some number of lines out from it, and this makes a lot of things a lot easier. Obviously traversal gets easier. This diamond hook has 4 of these, so I can use them to get around, and then if you jump, it clears the hooks. So I'm going to just recommend, if you start the game too very early on, build yourself the iron hook, which has 2 hooks, and never look back, and then you just put it in a bobble spot, and you can also look at mapping it. I have it mapped to Q because I hate throwing items and I love hooks. So the first thing we did is clear out one of these buildings. You can see most of this terracotta is still here, but if I go up to the roof, you can see there's plenty more ruined buildings all over. So we cleared out this building, ended up harvesting a bunch of crops just to get our food taken care of, and then we embarked on the next important thing in this mod pack, which is these work tables. And we have them labeled, you can see. So we have a food table that stores recipes so that we can easily load up the table's inventory and then make food out of it. And then for Omnitech, you're going to be using GregTech tools. So we created tables that have each of the initial tools and the parts you need for them. So if I click on, a stick, it'll just load that recipe, and then if it has the contents, I can make it right here. There's a hammer, all sorts of fun stuff like that. And we can just kind of keep, going through these. We have 2 sets of tools, world tools, so like a mining hammer, which is fantastic. And we just kind of extended that out. And then we also supplemented our storage initially with storage crates, which are super useful. And we also very quickly on, I started building out a drawer storage system. So the initial drawers filled this room. And then we rapidly ran into needing more and more space. So that led to the warehouse, which is color-coded drawer walls. One wall for ore, one for ingots, different walls for different things. And then just recently I ended up expanding to a second wall. And the trick that I figured out, or maybe not a trick, just a design feature, is you can see that we have, if you know how storage drawers work, they use drawer controllers to connect linked drawers. So if you look underneath here, you can see that there's a drawer controller, and if I shift click on it, it'll show you everything in the drawers. That above it has a trim panel behind a storage crate, and the storage crate sits on top of a hopper. So the storage crate, you can put anything in here, it'll fall into the hopper, it'll go into the chest, and then using that trim panel connects to this entire wall of drawers and lets you somewhat auto sort all your stuff. This room is actually the maximum size if you had a drawer controller. Oh, I know how to walk. I originally had a crate here with a hopper to a controller right where that floor is, and then these stone lines were trim panels all the way out to these walls, and it was one giant system. That got a bit unmanageable, so I recently reworked it, and then used some fun cosmetics to set this up using a framing table. The other cool thing that we ended up doing is each of these furnaces, these are upgraded diamond furnaces, but you start with a stone one and you go through a variety of tiers of furnaces. You can see in the quest book it gives you right here your iron furnace, copper, silver, gold, diamond. And they each just have more space and process faster. But what we ended up doing is connecting, and here I'll show you how these hooks are nifty. So we have, not quite the best view. Let's try again. We'll get there. So we connected the bottom of these furnaces to some item conduit that pulls out of the furnace and into that drawer controller. So what that does is it lets us essentially, when we need to batch process, which is huge in this mod pack, we can grab a stack of ore or many stacks of ore, dump it in the furnace. When it comes over here into the output, it'll go straight into that item conduit, into the drawer controller, and get loaded up into our wall. So it makes it a little easier to deal with everything. So that's an early game storage solution, crates or drawers, or a combination as we have. And then we worked through most of the early game just following the quests. If you're unfamiliar with Omnifactory or any of these quest ones, if you just kind of follow along the quests as they unlock, it'll help you get through everything and explain a lot. I will say the quest book for this pack is pretty good. And as you can see, we're just finishing up the beginning, getting into the early game. And so right now we're kind of working on getting all of our low voltage machines over here put together, and then all of our medium voltage machines. That's one of the next things for us to unlock. But so early on, another big thing we ran into was there's a way in this mod pack, if you do an alternate start, to get to a Lost Cities dimension, which can be very useful. Again, like I have these Darksteel boots from loot chests. We have a nice Ender sword, just some nice little things that make things easier. And so one of the main ways to do that is to explore these city ruins, and if you pick an alternate start, these city ruins are pretty small. They're only like 1 or 2 stories tall, they're full of dirt. So we made a bed portal to the other Lost Cities dimension, and that's 2 blocks of diamond, a bed, and surrounded with skulls. And just to show you what that looks like, well, didn't want to change my spawn point, but whatever. This brings us to a Lusher overworld. So it's a lot easier to find rubber trees, easier to find sand, easier to find animals. Just a easier overall method. One thing to note with this bed portal is you need to build it on both sides. It doesn't give you it's not like the Nether where it creates your return. You have to have 4 blocks of diamond, 2 beds, and 12 skulls. And one of the problems we ran into, apparently that's where the bed takes me now, on top of the warehouse. So that's fun. One thing we ran into early on when trying to build that is trying to farm skeleton skulls, because those are the skulls you need. So we found a skeleton spawner. That's what's inside this big, heard a witch. There's a witch. Ah, crap. Let's get that. And we will kill her. Ow. Ender. Lovely blade. It's gonna hurt for a while. So basically we encased this, come on, quit ticking down. It'll be very embarrassing if I die during the middle of filming. 23 seconds of poison left. Hey. If you can't tell, I'm not the greatest at Minecraft combat. I just kind of muddle through. This is going to be an embarrassing death, isn't it? We'll see. There we go. Okay. So, not dying. My microphone died for a split second. So I'll plug that back in. And back to not being completely incompetent, hopefully. Anyway, we encased the skeleton spawner in this facade of brick. We put some water, and that leads to a drop chute. We have a couple different ways to get to it because we've iterated this a few times. Here are some more of the spawners. Oh, looks like one of my fellow players removed them. There was a spawner there, quite a few spawners. So we created a drop chute using water to channel them to the drop chute. And I think what we're using is we have a gold spike here on a piston, so you can stand here and get experience. I forget which. There's gold spikes, diamond spikes, wood spikes, and we've set up a few different ways at this point to handle this, but we originally had a drop chute to here. So I think this is set up to collect loot drops when they die, and then sometimes one of our guys likes to AFK next to that other spike to build up bulk enchantments. So you can see we have just chests full of bulk enchantments. So another little tip there for enchantments is if you need books, go through the ruins. They are full of stuff, full of bookcases that you can break and get books. So Kind of the last little tip and trick I want to go over on this video, and then think about some for our next one, is we started building a bunch of our basic machines, and we needed power. And this uses GregTech machines and GregTech power. So we got steam dynamos right off the bat. It's one of the first machines you actually unlock. And steam dynamos can actually burn sugarcane, which is nice because it's very easy to get massive quantities of sugarcane. And it's also easy to create these infinite water sources early in the game. So what we did, and I'll go up and show you, is maybe take a nap so we can get some sunlight. And set my, I'll set the spawn point later. So what we did is create something called SNAD, which is taking sand, turning it into compressed sand, and then double compressed sand. And you get SNAD, and I think Direwolf has showed this. So behind that SNAD is a redstone clock. So there's a row here of 7 SNAD, behind them is 7 redstone clocks, and that is what is letting this sugarcane grow so quickly. And so the sugarcane grows, and then there's an observer, and as soon as the observer, there we go, the observer sees that end row of sugarcane, and then we use just some basic redstone conduit. We haven't cleaned this up yet. It fires the signal down this whole row of pistons to break the top 2 rows. Another trick here is if this is too much capacity, you could cap the sugarcane. And so the water is flowing to carry most of the sugarcane, but to capture the rest of the sugarcane, we have another system in place, which is carts with hoppers with 2 little redstone tracks catching all that sugarcane from under the SNAD. And so one piece to keep in mind here is you have to build this track first so that that SNAD doesn't fall down. And then this hopper, and so the water flows into this hopper, the mine cart comes to this hopper, and we have a crate that's just full of sugarcane. And that sugarcane goes with item conduit. You could use pipes or something to all of these dynamos. And then each bank of dynamos is fed by an infinite water source with water conduit. And so that is how we are powering everything. And so we also created a cobblestone generator and a line of macerators that gets us cobble, gravel, sand, and then from the sand we can make SNAD. We use these generators to power some CEFs that are holding these flux capacitors, and that powers our blast furnace, and then we have another line of power from the top row of dynamos that follows the ceiling here over to our cable that goes into the back of our machines. And we have a couple of these set up with hoppers and crates to just make bulk processing easier again. And I lied, one last thing. You may be wondering, how did you get SNAD? Well, or enough sand for SNAD, and we did that by going to the overworld and just going nuts. And then you might be wondering, how did you get all those rails and the powered rails, especially really early game? And the answer is, under these cities, there are subways. And if I switch to cave layer, no? There we go. If I switch to the cave layer and go down a layer or 2, you will see these tunnel sections here. And these tunnel sections are subways that have rail. So here's one I lit up and went spelunking in. So these have rail lines in them with powered rails and redstone torches. So if you just run around, you'll find on the surface, you'll see these structures that connect to those. And then if you just dig in or find a subway terminal, you can find a lot of easy rail. So there's a lot of fun to have with exploring in this pack. Helps you jumpstart yourself a little bit. You'll find lots of useful stuff in chests, some surprisingly late game stuff. So that's the final tip for this video is go explore and play around with vanilla mechanics that can help you out. So I hope this was mildly useful for folks. I'll probably keep making little videos as we go through to highlight certain things we did and just try and share our journey through this mod pack with everyone. So thank you and hope you enjoyed.